So I'd like to call on Caroline Lucas, Vice President, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and a former member of Parliament, and she is with the Green Party of UK, United Kingdom.
I bring warm greetings from CND, the UK's campaign for nuclear disarmament. And we stand together in our common struggle to eliminate all nuclear weapons. And we send our deepest respect and gratitude to the Hibaksha, who worked tirelessly to keep alive the memory of the horrific events of the 6th of August, 1945. And we also recognise and pay tribute to the role of the Global South in its leadership role in the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Nuclear weapons are the most destructive and toxic weapons ever created, threatening all forms of life. They are illegal and immoral. And yet the world's 9 declared nuclear-armed states have already amassed the equivalent firepower of 145,000 Hiroshima bombs, enough to destroy the whole world many times over. You know that these are increasingly dangerous times, and the threat of nuclear war has resurged with a vengeance. And that has led the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute to claim the age of disarmament is over. They write, and I quote, "We see a clear trend of growing nuclear arsenals, sharpened nuclear rhetoric, and the abandonment of arms control agreements." But as we mark the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we simply cannot allow that to continue to be the case. Now, more than ever, we must amplify the voices of the Hibaksha, strengthen the global movement for peace, increase the pressure on nuclear weapon states to halt these nuclear dangers that threaten people and planet, and urgently re-establish commitments by the global community to international disarmament frameworks. And that starts with 3 tasks. First, we need to demystify and debunk the false language of so-called deterrence. By showing it to be the flawed concept that it is, we can perhaps help people to break out of denial. Second, we have to build on the groundbreaking treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons, and we urgently need to take further steps to delegitimize the possession of those weapons. And third, I think we need to strengthen our citizens' movements, making stronger connections in particular with the climate and social justice movements. Now, I'll say a few more words about each of those 3 tasks in a moment, but first, just a little bit more context. Why does the Stockholm Peace Research Institute sound the alarm? What are the particular dangers of today? The US withdrawal from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019, followed by Russia doing the same thing, marked a deeply serious collapse in the world disarmament framework. Moreover, some of the key existing international arms controls treaties are also under threat or soon to expire. Now, the only major nuclear arms control treaty left between the world's largest nuclear weapon states, the US and Russia, is the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. But that, as we know, is due to expire in February of next year, and that would leave them without limits on their arsenals for the first time in half a century. And both are already pursuing extensive modernization programs. For example, the White House has been seeking to raise the National Nuclear Security Administration's annual weapons budget by 29% to $25 billion. That is the largest increase in spending on non-nuclear warhead development, testing and production since 1962, the year of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Meanwhile, nuclear weapon states signed up to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, up for review next year, continue themselves to fail their commitments to take steps to disarm their nuclear weapons, driving again further threats of proliferation. And again, far from abiding by their legal duties to take steps to disarm their nuclear weapons, these states are actually increasing and modernizing their arsenals. And shamefully, this includes my own country, the UK. Just last month, the British government announced it would spend £15 billion on the development of new nuclear warheads. Not only that, but Britain has also announced plans to purchase 12 F-35A nuclear-capable fighter jets from the US, which would enable it to launch nuclear weapons from the air as well as from the sea. Now, that decision has been made without any parliamentary debate, and again breaches the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The British government also plans to build up to 12 nuclear-powered submarines as part of the AUKUS treaty with the US and Australia, further increasing tensions in an already volatile situation in the Asia-Pacific. And weapons are becoming not only deadlier, but riskier, with the integration of nuclear and conventional capabilities increasing the prospect of miscalculation. And we are sadly not short of potential flashpoints. Russia has repeatedly threatened the use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine, while India's unprecedented use of BrahMos cruise missiles in its recent clash with Pakistan marks a new and dangerous phase in South Asia's strategic balance. And all of this obscene spending on nuclear weapons is justified to their hard-pressed populations by this myth of deterrence. For example, in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced last month that the £15 billion for what he said was, and I quote, our sovereign warhead programme, neatly overlooking the fact that it can't actually be used without US support. He said that £15 billion was being spent to, and again I quote, secure our deterrent for decades to come, to be part of the historic renewal of our nuclear deterrent as the ultimate guarantor of our safety and security. An investment, he said, in British pride and the British people. My friends, if national pride really depends on our ability to destroy the world many times over, then we are more morally bankrupt than perhaps some of us thought. And let's examine this myth of deterrence. In reality, it is a euphemism from the early days of the Cold War, deliberately designed to cut off debate by making it sound as if nuclear weapons were safe, sensible, useful, and necessary. Nothing could be further from the truth. And repeatedly calling, for example, the UK's Trident nuclear submarines the deterrent is just absurd. This language doesn't confer the capability to deter any more than calling a cat dog would give a cat the ability to bark. Deterrence theory is entirely unproven, and nor can it be proven. In logic, one cannot prove a negative. That is, that doing something causes something else not to happen. That a nuclear attack has not happened may be a result of any number of other factors, or simply of exceptional good luck so far. To attribute the absence of nuclear war to nuclear deterrence is to register a false positive, which imbues nuclear deterrence with a false sense of efficacy. And many military experts themselves argue that in fact nuclear weapons make us far less safe, primarily because their very existence increases the likelihood that they'll be used and contributes to the volume of nuclear material circulating around the world. Nuclear weapons drive proliferation. If we claim nuclear weapons are essential for our security, how can we possibly deny other countries the right to seek to acquire them too? And if they did, would that really make a safer world? I don't think so. The best deterrent, surely, is to work with other nations to solve global threats, like the fossil fuel-induced climate disruption, like poverty, and the desperation that fuels conflicts and hunger and violence around the world. So just in my last closing words, I want to touch on those other two tasks I mentioned. First, around delegitimizing nuclear weapons. The treaty prohibiting nuclear weapons has done some excellent work on this, but there's more to be done. For example, a campaign could be launched to ensure everyone in the nuclear chain of command, from a national leader down to the launch officers, is treated as a potential war criminal. As such, they would be increasingly subject to legal measures and sanctions that are enforceable in non-nuclear states. By enshrining the nuclear taboo in law, we could accelerate the moral and political delegitimization of nuclear weapons in the same way as has happened with chemical and biological weapons. We could also seek to clarify in international law that any use of nuclear weapons in any circumstance will necessarily and automatically constitute a war crime. And for that to happen, the 93 current signatories to that treaty could act even more effectively as a bloc, so they can't be divided by the nuclear nine. And finally, my friends, we need to redouble our demands for governments to pledge to work towards disarmament. And we could take inspiration, I think, from the climate movement by demanding legally binding parliamentary timetables for disarmament. And just as the climate COP process, the Conference of the Parties, are very public events garnering the world's media attention, so we need to bring the same kind of media spotlight to the meetings of the treaty prohibiting nuclear weapons. We need to get them out of that UN building in New York. We need to be giving them the real oxygen of publicity, so the issue of nuclear disarmament can more easily be the subject of public and political pressure. And in particular, we need to focus on the universalization of the treaty, as set out in Article 12. In other words, that each state party shall encourage states not party to this treaty to sign, ratify, accept, approve, or accede to the treaty with the goal of universal adherence of all states to the treaty. And a first demand, of course, would be to move nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert, to cancel launch on warning postures, and to ensure no first-use commitment from all nuclear weapon states. In conclusion, governments across the world have shown that it is possible to come together to develop nuclear-free zones. They exist in the South Pacific, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and Africa. That is what can be done when there is political will. And so again, at this international meeting, we pledge ourselves to continue to build that political will until we reach a nuclear-free world, until there are no more Hiroshimas, until there are no more Nagasaki's.